Hey guys, Falcon Pro Jason Christie here. I want to talk to you today about cranking rods, how to choose them, some of the mistakes I've seen guys make in choosing crankbait rods. I have a couple examples out here. First of all, when you're talking cranking, that's not just one bait, meaning not just one crankbait rod. So, you know, I may have a shallow running crankbait, I may have a medium running crankbait, I may have a deep running crankbait. I may be throwing a crankbait that I have to, you know, when I get a bite, I have to get the fish out of cover. So even though it's crankbait, I may throw 3 or 4 different rods throughout the day for each crankbait. So first of all, let's talk about some of the mistakes that I've seen anglers make. Number one thing to me is in a cranking rod is I want a rod that's comfortable for me to fish with, you know, for a length of period. You know, if I'm deep cranking, I want a rod that I can lock in my body and not be tired after doing it for an hour or so. So if you notice on a lot of the cranking rods, we have long butts here. And what that's for is so you can put that reel in your hand and lock that into your side. So you can actually leverage the rod and the bait from your side, and there's really no effort taking place there. So first mistake I've seen is guys try to use cranking rods, you know, with a short handle where everything is in their wrist and their arm, when they can easily solve that by just getting a longer butt and putting it against their side there. Another mistake I see is guys using a rod that is too stiff, like broomstick stiff. There are times that I want a little bit stiffer rod, but you want a rod that has a little bit of tip. You just imagine, you know, the plug coming along, and that fish comes up there and gets it. I mean, he has it, you know, for a half a second at least before you even know it. And then whenever you feel the bite and you pull, you have to have the right action, meaning you don't want a broomstick and pull it away from them, you know, tear it out. You want them to get the bait a little bit, so you want some tip. But also you want enough rod in your hand to be able to drive the hook points past the barb. So there is a happy medium in that. So make sure you're using the right, you know, the right rod for the crankbait they're using. I have a couple examples here. Just going to talk about them and why I use it. So this is just a square bill crankbait, and this is the Falcon Pro 7-foot all around. I really think they call it the all around for a really good reason. Like, I use this rod for a lot of different cranking. I use it for wintertime cranking, meaning like, you know, a Bandit 300, you know, those 8 to 10 foot divers, because it has some tip. In the wintertime, these fish don't fight as hard as they do in the summer. They don't come up and go crazy. They really just get out there and waller. So it has a good tip. That tip allows the fish to be able to get the bait, but it still has enough backbone that whenever I sweep, I'm going to drive the barbs into that fish and a lot less likely to lose it. So I use it for square billing. I talked earlier about being able to pull a fish away from cover. You know, this rod has enough backbone that if I'm coming down a log and a fish gets it, if I lean into him pretty good, then I can get him away from that log and be able to get him in. And, you know, also with the tip, you know, having a little bit of tip allows you to cast a little bit easier, into the wind, longer cast, things like that. You know, the perception always has been, is a cranking rod needs to be a spaghetti noodle. I think 20 years ago, that was probably the case whenever a lot of us were using monofilament lines. Well, now we're using fluorocarbon, which is a lot less stretch. So you don't have to have, you know, a pool noodle to be able to fight those fish and be able to get a good hook in them. So pretty much the rule for me is a bait, you know, 5, 6, 7 foot or less. This is the rod that I use. You know, a crankbait like a 8 foot to 12 foot runner, kind of that medium, you know, a good rod is the deep runner. You gain a little bit of length, a few inches in length. It's really kind of the same rod. but you just gain some length to be able to throw that crankbait farther out there. Deep crankbait here. This is the one I think is really, really important, because if you don't have the right rod throwing this big crankbait, it will wear you out. Long handle, I can pin it right there, lock my wrist and my arm, use that leverage to be able to reel it. You think about this. If I make a super long cast, 60, 75 yards with this plug, I have a lot of line out, and I need to be able to drive the hooks in, even on a crankbait. Notice, a little bit of tip that allows me to launch that bait, but also enough backbone that on a long cast, I can swing that thing and drive those hooks in. Once I get the fish hooked, this tip allows me to be able to fight the fish a lot better. And the key thing across the board with a crankbait rod is you want something light that you can handle for a long period of time and it not wear you out. So that's my crankbait setups. I hope you learned something, and you can check them out at falconrods.com.